Hello, good day. In this video, I'm going to introduce prospect theory to you. The central challenge to investors is the problem of decision making under uncertainty. How do people actually make decisions when faced with risk? The prospect theory describes how decisions are made by investors. It is useful for investment managers and investors to understand their biases. Let's learn together. This video is divided into the following sections. It is hoped that students will be able to understand what is prospect theory and use the theory to evaluate potential decision biases. The prospect theory was first formulated by Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky in 1979 in the journal article An Analysis of Decision Under Risk, which was published in Econometrica. This paper presents a critique of expected utility theory as a descriptive model of decision making under risk, and develops an alternative model called prospect theory. Essentially, Kahneman and Tversky brought to light the incidents, causes, and effects of human error in economic reasoning. In year 2002, Daniel Kahneman was awarded the Nobel Memorial Prize in Economic Sciences. The prospect theory was cited in the decision to award Kahneman the Nobel Prize. Daniel Kahneman's work has inspired a new generation of research in cognitive psychology that has enriched financial and economic models. Knowledge of perception about decision theory has contributed to a large step forward in behavioral finance research. The prospect theory is viewed as the intellectual foundation of behavioral economics and finance. I would strongly encourage you to read this book by Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow. In his book, Kahneman mentions that the prospect theory turned out to be the most significant work both of them ever did, and their article is among the most often cited in the social sciences. Since it was developed, the prospect theory has been used in various disciplines. For example, it is even used to evaluate various aspects of political decision-making in international relations. Before I explain about prospect theory, let me set the background about decision making. Each day, people make decisions. Sometimes, our decisions have significant consequences. Decision making demands substantial time and effort to devise a systematic approach to analyze various causes of action. When a decision maker must choose one among a number of possible actions, The decision will depend on uncertainties to be resolved in the future. Economists assume each individual maps from every possible relevant level of wealth to a number that represents his or her utility or happiness, and that under uncertainty, each individual acts to maximize the expected level of utility. However, the problem with expected utility maximization is most individuals are unable to report their expected levels of wealth in a short amount of time within a reasonable degree of accuracy. Kahneman and Tversky found that under conditions of uncertainty, human decisions systematically depart from those predicted by standard economic theory. The prospect theory modifies analytical of rational risk-averse investors found in standard financial theory. Now, we come to an important question. What is prospect theory? Prospect theory is a psychology theory that describes how people make decisions when presented with alternatives that involve risk, probability, and uncertainty. This theory describes the way people often frame and value decisions involving financial uncertainty. In essence, prospect theory holds that people make decisions based on perceived gain or losses. In many situations, investors tend to frame investment choices in terms of potential gains and losses relative to specific reference points. Prospect theory seeks to explain decisions that are inconsistent with rational probability assessments and standard utility functions. Under conditions of uncertainty, human decisions systematically depart from those predicted by standard economic theory. Human judgment may take heuristic shortcuts that systematically diverge from basic principles of probability. This means people don't accurately use the probability of expected values when given a choice between certain outcomes and probable outcomes. If two choices are put before an individual, both equal, with one presented in terms of gains and the other in terms of possible losses, investors will choose the one presented in terms of potential gains. People are usually averse to possibility of losing, such that they would rather avoid loss rather than take a risk to make an equivalent gain. Investors choose perceived gains because losses cause a greater emotional impact. As such, the prospect theory is also known as the loss aversion theory. Do individuals evaluate gains or losses differently? Prospect theory, in essence, describes how individuals evaluate gains and losses. Investors value gains and losses differently. Investors will be risk-averse when it comes to potential gains. When facing potential gains, individuals prefer certainty. Investors will be risk-seeking when it comes to potential losses. When facing potential losses, individual is willing to gamble or speculate. Next, I would like to explain the phenomenon of prospect theory graphically. In this figure, the x-axis represents dollar amount of gains or losses, while the y-axis represents the psychological value or utility. According to Kahneman and Tversky, people weigh all potential gains and losses in relation to some benchmark reference point, that is, the point of origin on the graph. The function is concave to the origin for gains, but convex to the origin for losses. As you can see, to the right of 0, the curve is concave. To the left of 0, the curve is convex. For gains, an individual's utility function is concave, representing risk-adverse behavior. For losses, an individual's utility function is convex, representing risk-seeking or risk-loving behavior. Risk-adverse behavior prevails in the domain of gains, that is, above the x-axis, while risk-seeking behavior prevails in the domain of losses, that is, below the x-axis. Investors will be motivated to lock in gains but not to realize losses. Thus, when they face a potential loss, they prefer to gamble. The value function is asymmetric. Given the same changes in absolute value of gain or loss, the impact on utility is bigger for losses than for gains. For example, a gain of 100 increases utility by less than a loss of 100 reduces utility. The segment of the curve representing gains is flatter. For a conventional risk-adverse investor, higher wealth provides satisfaction or utility, but at a diminishing rate. The curve flattens as the individual becomes wealthier. The segment of the curve representing losses is steeper. This reflects losses hurt much more than commensurate gains. Let's conclude our learning. I would love to present more examples, application, and research findings on prospect theory. However, in view of the length of this video, I will create more videos on prospect theory. Do watch out for my next video on that. Finally, we have come to the end of this video. If you have benefited from this educational material, please click like, share, or subscribe. Thank you. See you and goodbye.